In this video, I'm going to share with you the true story of how caring for this project is making the project all that much better or ruining me and my company. We'll see what happens. Stay for the ride. It may sound strange, but as an architect, when I sign a contract, my commitment is really not towards my client, but it is rather towards my building. It's not that this allows me not to care for my client's requirements or desires, quite the contrary actually. Normally, my client's requirements are aligned with those of my building and with mine. Otherwise, we wouldn't be signing the contract. But architects, and myself included, we're often guilty of wanting to do more for our project than what the client actually asks us to do. In today's fast-paced world, architects are expected to deliver projects ever faster so that they can be submitted for the building authorities for the building permits to be approved. And this process is quite long. Normally the approval process is actually longer than the time we architects have to develop projects. But, and here's the premise, what happens when you actually do have the time and you can use it as a resource for developing a project and showing that you actually care for what you design? Well, this is the approach we seem to be taking with my client for a multi-residential project within walking distance from my office. For this site, which I analyzed in a previous video, I came up with a proposal which I rather liked, and I started showing to the neighbors to see what they thought about it. You may be asking yourself, what do I even care about the neighbors' reaction to my project? But quite a lot, actually. The decision we took with my client was to go for a bolder design, trying to build more, but not for the sake of building more, but actually because we think that this approach would actually be better for the council, for the neighbors, and the overall neighborhood. We could have, of course, simply aimed for less and just build, like Frank Gehry so eloquently puts it, just another building. I could have simply proposed to build 3 row houses. I could then have asked my client to subdivide each house into 2 units, and this would have been the easy approach to have 6 units in this lot. I really don't think that going behind the council is the way to go. I would have never agreed to that from the beginning with my client. He knew that. But unfortunately, this is what happens around here. We actually want to do the opposite. We want to be as open as possible with our design. So we want input, we want feedback from the neighbors, from the council, and we want to integrate it into the design to see what we can come up with. So therefore, meeting the neighbors with the project that we actually liked seems like a crucial step. So I did meet with the neighbors and I showed them my project and I explained to them how we came to this design. I explained to them how the plinth is working to reduce the perceived height of the project. And I explained how these setbacks are actually a reaction to what we see happening on the party wall. I also explained that the community guidelines allow us to build even higher than what we are actually proposing. Unfortunately, all these explanations did not go too well. It's understandable. People are naturally scared of change, and here we are proposing a big change in relation to what is happening already on site. And as I feared, most neighbors were comparing the present situation with my project. And of course, they're rather happy with the present situation where there's nothing there, but this plot will be developed. So let me tell you about how these conversations went. For keeping things simple, we can call our neighbors neighbor A, B, C, D, and E. We can scratch the last one because I actually never got the chance to speak with them. Initially, we were off to a great start. We met with neighbor B, and not only did he like our project, but he actually loved it and he offered to stand behind it. He even liked the idea of building a house further in or accessible from the bend because he himself wanted to do that, actually. He admitted as much. He even gave us a few ideas on how to deal with the roof so that our roof can start to have a lower impact on the neighbors. Of course, we integrated this comment immediately into our design. So I was very excited walking out of this meeting because it went exceedingly well and I was at high expectations for my other meetings. Unfortunately, the other ones did not go as well. With neighbor A, we had a great discussion and they were quite friendly, but they didn't like the project. The reality is, it was nothing against my project particularly. It was just against the fact of having a building there because they feel that they will lose afternoon sun. And they are absolutely right. They will lose afternoon sun. But unfortunately, there's little I can do about it. Whatever we build there, if it reaches at least the height of my smallest neighbor, sunlight will be blocked. But again, this is not their plot, it's my client's plot and he has the right to develop it. So even if we do just one house, he's going to lose some sunlight. That's just a reality. So as good a conversation we had, they said that they will stand against the project because they feel that they can preserve sunlight. Then we come to neighbor C. Well, this was trickier. And of course, I knew it was going to be tricky because the situation is already tricky. I mean, they have windows on the party wall. I tried respecting these windows and I created setbacks. I agree with this person that the setbacks, although they're better than having the windows blocked, they are not significant enough to allow a lot of daylight in. She's definitely going to lose some daylight. But again, the plot doesn't belong to her, so we have to develop it. And this is the best compromise I could manage between my client's requirements and her needs. She also considers that her house will ultimately lose value because as it stands, she has a freestanding villa, and if I build my project, her villa will start to become a terrace house. I tried explaining to her that this is not really the case if her house is built to the limit of her plot. Despite the fact that there's no house built against it, this is still considered a terrace house. So again, she is going to be against the project because she feels her house is going to lose value, which is a pity. So already 2-1 down, we went and had a conversation with neighbor D. In all honesty, the conversation was completely reasonable. She just didn't want to have any buildings interrupting her view from her living room to the back. That made sense. This is what I already tried to integrate into the design and into the placement of the house to the back. And she was very concerned about her party wall that has to be rebuilt. And that's completely fine. Now, she wasn't too happy with having an apartment building next to her, but she was willing to accept it or not intercede against it if she could get a parking space from my client. So that's a negotiation that they have to do separate, but it could work. So now I had to call my client with the heavy news that we had 2 neighbors that were going to be opposing the project. Now, 2 out of 4 may not seem like a lot, but given the ambition of the project, this could be a determining factor. Probably my client is not going to want to go ahead with this project. So I called him up for a meeting, but before he came, I wanted to double down. Up to now, we're coming up with projects and ideas that respected the guidelines as much as possible, but didn't seem to make anybody happy. So I started asking myself, what would happen if we took the opposite approach? What would happen if, instead of following the guidelines, we proposed something that did not really follow the guidelines, but followed the requirements the neighbors had? So with that in mind, I came up with this new proposal. This keeps the height of the smallest neighbor, and I build against it so as to prolong the urban facade, so as to create that urban canyon. It also becomes interrupted, creating a public space between my neighbor C and my new building, offering neighbor C her freestanding villa, and offering to the council a small park that could be used for child's play. This small park also creates a break in the urban canyon, allowing for afternoon sun to hit my neighbor B, who was unhappy about losing it. This way, if we build this, well, he can pretty much be guaranteed that nobody will build something there in the future either. Finally, this proposal allows me to have my building facing the southern aspect. And if you've been following any of my videos, you know that this is something I absolutely love. Now, I think that this is a good starting point, but I still feel I have to be mindful of two key aspects. One, I have to be careful about the views I'm creating or maybe creating towards my neighbor D. And two, the volume I seem to be creating now seems rather massive. I think this can be easily addressed. I can just break it down into smaller units and manifest this breakdown into smaller units and next to bigger units, sort of replicating what happens in the town around it. But of course, this is just a starting point, so it needs to be developed further. Precisely because I care, I'm willing to drop the plans all the way to a building permit and be paid only if the permit gets through. Otherwise, I'm willing to retake it and redraw it into something that the council will approve at my own cost. Of course, I understand that the client has something to lose as well, because he'll be wasting a lot of time. It will take 6 months before the council can come up with a decision on this project. So we have to see what the client wants to do. But this is the risk you take when you're an architect and you design like you actually care. Bien, acabo de grabar 20 minutos y no tenía micrófono. Tengo que grabar todo de vuelta. Esta madre de corazón.